What would happen to humans if bees and tuna went extinct? It seems like we don't depend on these animals for a lot, but we actually need them more than you'd think. 5 out of 8 tuna species are at risk of extinction, mostly because they are heavily overfished. This is the process of taking wildlife from the sea at rates that are too high for the fish species to replace themselves. Overfishing is a problem because most countries have no sustainable catch limits. The latest assessment for International Union for Conservation of Nature shows that 3 species are threatened with global extinction, while 2 more will be under threat without action to help them. Southern bluefin tuna are already critically endangered with little hope of recovery. Their extinction could be contributed to pollution, rising water temperatures, and loss of habitat. The decline of bluefin could also be contributed to the fact that it is a sushi delicacy in Japan. Tuna are also long-lived with slower reproductive rates, which means populations would take longer to recover. Tuna population has declined by 96.4%. Population of all large predator fish in oceans have declined by 90% in the last 50 years. Equally concerning is the fact that about 90% of specimens currently fished are young fish that have not yet reproduced. This makes it even harder for tuna to rebuild their populations. Tuna are at the top of the marine food chain, and their decline could have negative impacts on other species. Their decline affects biodiversity by causing several other marine species to become extinct or endangered as well, which destabilizes the food chain and can impact the entire ecosystem. This impact could affect species such as sharks and seabird populations. It's speculated that within the next 25 years, 1/4 of the planet's biodiversity will be in danger of extinction due solely to commercial fishing. This may not sound like a big deal, but scientists have predicted a total collapse of all fish that are currently caught commercially by 2048. Nearly 1/3 of the world's supply of commercially caught fish has already collapsed. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, 85% of global fish stocks are overexploited, depleted, or recovering from depletion. This may not affect humans directly, but if we don't do something about this now, ocean life could be a thing of the past. However, tuna isn't the only species we need to be worried about. The consequence of a dying bee population impacts man at the highest levels on our food chain. Bees play an extremely significant role in producing the fruits and vegetables we need to stay alive. More than 130 fruits and vegetables that make up a nutritious diet are cross-pollinated by bees. And bees are responsible for $30 billion a year in crops. The decline of bee populations could be contributed to pesticides and recent harsh winters. These winters that stay freezing cold well into spring have been instrumental in decimating the bee population by up to 70% in Iowa, as well as other high-yielding honey states such as the Dakotas, Montana, and Minnesota. Commercial bees raised on farms, along with wild bees, are responsible for pollination of an estimated 80% of all food crops in the US. Some plants are pollinated by wind, but that rate is very slow. In the last half-decade alone, 30% of the national bee population has disappeared. Now, if that didn't scare you enough, just think about what would happen if bees actually went extinct. If bees went extinct, our supermarkets would have half the amount of fruits and vegetables that they have now. Almonds wouldn't exist, coffee would become expensive and rare, apples, avocados, onions, and several types of berries would also become scarce. Our diets would suffer tremendously, and many humans would also suffer from malnutrition, as less production of food crops will lead to worldwide famine. Not only would food costs skyrocket, but cotton wouldn't grow either. Just think about all the things that you use daily that are made of cotton. Underwear, shirts, jeans, bed sheets, socks, bandages, soap, cosmetics, and pharmaceuticals all use cotton. Without bees, you wouldn't have any of that. But humans aren't the only ones that depend on bees for survival. Cows, sheep, and goats all rely on pollinated plants for food. Without bees pollinating these plants, all these animals would become extinct. However, we'd still have food staples such as chicken and pigs. The decline of bees would also affect the environment. Canola, which is grown to use as both a fuel and cooking oil, depends highly on pollination. It's also used to produce biofuel. If we ran out of biofuel, we'd have to rely completely on fossil fuels, which would put further strain on the environment. The loss of bees would also mean that fresh water will dry up due to the lack of trees to retain water. Simply put, a world without bees would struggle to sustain a human population of 7 billion. My point of view on this matter is biased because I'm a middle-class American, and so it feels like the extinction of bees and tuna will not affect me as much. However, if the bees in tuna go extinct, every human will be negatively impacted, and if we don't start taking steps to save these species now, the consequences could be disastrous.